Hello, everybody. You just joined a conversation about what smart buying is, why it's important, how you can start implementing it at your brewery. I'm joined by Dan of the Beverage Federation to talk about the do's and don'ts of smart brewery buying. But first, Dan, I've got a personal question for you. You always are all the first in email to hit my inbox every single day. So the first question is, how early do you actually wake up and start working? Then you can tell the world a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, Andrew, I was thinking about this the other day because I was getting some emails in the evening. I am worthless after about 9 o'clock. I will reread. So
To
I get
clarify,
up
you mean
early.
9 p.m., not 9
PM.
a.m.
So I lose productivity at the end of the night, but I am an early. I love cranking out emails, sometimes around 4:30, 5 a.m. And diving into it. So because of that fact that I am just useless after about 9, I have to get up early and get some caffeine and get the day started.
Well, it's nice to seize the day, and I try to do the same, not quite as early as you. So, why are you waking up so early? What are you doing? And tell everybody a little bit about yourself and the Beverage Federation.
Absolutely excited for this. Right in our wheelhouse. We'll dive right into it, but a little bit about background of myself and us. Again, Dan Clayson, and founder of the Beverage Federation. And if you haven't picked up on it as we go, you will realize that I have a real passion for all things purchasing, all things smart buying. That has been just an absolute rabbit hole for me the last couple of years of rolling sleeves up and diving into some of the things that I know from talking to other breweries is just not their cup of tea. So we are a group purchasing organization designed to do exactly that, to help with smart buying and unpack that for our breweries that we work with and provide a resource to that. So great stuff to talk about today. And we put together a few things that hopefully people leave with just a few things that they can start to implement in their brewery and for their teams. A little bit about myself. I struggle with the debate on Star Wars versus Star Trek more so than you would realize. I'm amazed at how often I get asked. There's fellow nerds out there like myself in the community. I was going to a conference for distilling, and they actually had their survey was Star Trek, Star Wars. So I mean, I get into it. It's like being asked your favorite child. So I can never win with filling that out.
Dan, is it because you have the word federation in your company
I
organization
I
title that
mean
kind of
that
leads to that, perhaps?
That is not by accident. I feel like I have chosen in a way, but I have dropped several hints to my family that what I really need for my shelves behind me is some of those cool Lego sets for that would really help. But they are still not picking up on that. But yeah, so if you're ever talking to me, you're ever at a conference, you can definitely we will talk Excel and smart buying all day long. But if you want to talk either of those too, that's something we can also do over a pint. So just want people to know that. Another important thing, I am not an accountant. I will be the first one in the conversation to say that's a great question for your accountant. I think there is a perception or a misconception that when we're talking about buying, oh, that's what my accountant does, or that is something my accountant looks at, and that those are overlap. And at the end of the day, there are two swim lanes that are very, there's handoff of information, but it's two very distinct roles. And sometimes when you get into an accountant discussion, it's best to go to that resource. So you're making sure you're doing that. We're talking about how you're bringing things into the organization, how you're saving money, time on the front end. And as I mentioned, it's the passion. I have been running other small businesses through my career. I've worked in large businesses. And one of the things that I found that I was not doing well early in my career was the procurement. And so it became a little bit of an obsession of how can I do this better? And then how can I share that? And that's kind of where we tease this off really nicely when I get into the first concept that I talk with some of our breweries about and sort of things is the why. I start with that because if you don't understand the value and the importance of something, it really becomes hard to make any changes downstream. So we start off with like, why is cost savings important? Why does it deserve its own, silo that you're trying to do things in, and bucket of energy and effort, and not, talking sales or marketing or HR and some of these other equally important, but procurement and smart buying is critical for running a small business. And why is that? The cost reduction is really what helps fight with all of these other things outside of your control or that you are fighting. And that's something, Andrew, when I'm starting off, I say this is where starting to drive some costs can help with some of the other feeling of, you're not going to be able to stop inflation. You're not going to be able to go back and redo your summer's lower numbers, perhaps your patio environment being lower. But cost, supply chain issues, if something now is coming from further away or shipping change. There's all these things that are pushing down on you as a small bonus owner. Somehow that's how it feels. And so having a cost reduction program is a way to combat that or to balance it out. And then really it's so you can see that direct impact. That actually, this concept here, these two last concepts was eye-opening for me as a small business owner, is that if you can do this unlocks the positiveness of the profit that you can have within your organization. It's not an exercise that's should feel like homework, but you're doing it for best practices. You're doing it because you should do it. It absolutely directly impacts the profit of your organization. And for me, I'm a big visual. So this graph, and I had to find it and look through. I had a book somewhere that was trying to figure out what's the best way to visualize this. If you can show me a picture, I get that aha moment. But for me, years ago, I was running an IT organization, and we were providing a lot of hardware and software to our clients and our customers. And I was focused solely on sales. I thought sales solves all problems. And when how can we increase our sales? Because I think for me personally, sales and marketing were more fun. If you sell more, it's someone saying, I like what you're doing and I need more of it. I want more of it. Right. So, you come into a tap room and it's packed. It's like that's got to feel great. Right. What I'm making is people are loving. We have a great atmosphere. We're doing that. So I think on the front end, I'm right there with you that sales is it just feels like the engine that can help, also with things like inflation and, supply chain, let's just sell more and that will help. But this graph helped me tremendously. And actually, it helped me after I had to actually close that business, which was incredibly hard to do. And I started to try to understand, why did we go out of business, and get real honest with the numbers and where we could have spent some time and energy. And this graph was broken out that if we had been able to do some incremental cost reductions and find areas to save money, it would have directly gone to the bottom line. And I've got some examples of that. As I mentioned, I'm pretty concrete. So, what does that look like in a brewery environment? But this relationship was an aha moment. I did not understand this when I was running another company and was so focused on sales that this concept could be just as powerful and helpful to my business as trying to figure out how we got more people in the tap room or more people, buying us from the shelves. I don't think it'll ever get as cool and as sexy as increasing sales. I'll be honest, but maybe it can be that second thing that you tell your team about. Like, we had a great sales month, and we reduced our costs by 7%. As a big part of it, and recognize and explain that. So this concept is definitely the why of procurement, and where everything kind of was. Why is smart buying relevant or important? It really comes out of this.
So, Dan, for anyone who might just be listening and can't see the slide right now, kind of describe exactly what we're looking for. Because you're looking at this screen right now, it's a really powerful image, but what is it showing exactly?
Absolutely. You have your diagram here showing the relationship on the bottom of the axis there, that cost reduction. And as cost reduction goes up and we see this curve going up, This is your percentage of cost reduction. This is finding things throughout your organization month over month. And it's directly correlated on the other side of the axis to profit increase or percent. And we unpack some examples of that, but just conceptually, it's the idea of if you have, there's that expression is death by a thousand cuts. Well, that's a negative thing, right? That's, but this is the positive representation. If you find a little savings over here and a little savings over there and a little savings over there, that continues to increase your profit, throughout your organization. And where it's really powerful is if you can do it without making any changes to your production environment. So the expression you hear a lot is all things being equal. If you served 1,000 people in your restaurant and tap room and you put out 1,000 barrels, if you do that next month, you can do those two same things and you can reduce your costs and find some efficiencies. All of that directly goes to profit. You're maintaining your quality levels, and what you're seeing here in this graph is that relationship is incredibly powerful. That's something that when you sit down with that accountant I mentioned at the top at that quarterly review and you go through and they're saying, look I can now show you a report that shows that our profit levels are higher than this time last year. And you'll know where that's coming from. That's that conversation between the kind of purchasing mind and the accounting mind is this graph should pop into your head from time to time and say, how can we do more of that? How can we, get those cost reductions and who doesn't want more profit in their business and understand where it could come from.
And Dan, you mentioned that just the philosophy of making more money always sounds more appealing to most than reducing cost and saving more money. How can we change that mindset with our teams so way they want to actually save more money, work smarter, not harder, and just abide by that philosophy?
Yeah, I think it's exactly right, and I think that starts with those conversations and a couple of things that I've mentioned to sometimes the owner or the head brewer is picking some team members and having a candid conversation of, I don't know what I'm doing right now. Let's learn together, or giving some homework to maybe a junior employee and explaining some of this and saying, hey, can you reach out and I want you to get 3 quotes. I know we usually get our boots from so and so, but let's get 3 quotes to take a look at it, because we've got to be mindful of cost reduction. I think in the brewing community, I think there's a great conversation always around quality, which is great. But I think it's a good discussion to teach someone perhaps new to the industry to talk about that you can still maintain quality and find things that make the most economic sense for your organization too. This isn't about, I think that's a good discussion over a pint is like, yeah, we're looking for another provider and we're not looking for a mysterious truck that showed up on the, New Jersey Turnpike and has, the lowest price, malt you found, or, mysteriously 50% off. It's about saying, hey, we're going to go through this process and we're going to find out what makes the most sense for our brewery so we can be around in a few years. So I think it's those conversations that start off with, we haven't done this before and we're going to do it together. One of the things that I notice when I talk to sometimes a few people in a brewery is I think people are very much watching how the owner or head brewer buys. Right. So if they're buying everything, unfortunately, last minute or just going to Amazon, what people tend to pick up is when we need it, and cost isn't the factor. And I bet that's the image that owner wants to send. If anything, they want to say like, listen, I lay awake at night thinking about some of this stuff. So I think it is better to have a conversation. That's not our DNA. Our DNA is quality, but also, efficiencies so that we all are, around. And so that is one of the things I would say is probably transparency of when you start these programs is I haven't done it. Let's do it together. That actually makes one of our, when we talk about do's and don'ts later, one of our do's is work with the team and be candid about, we're doing this the first time and let's get started.
And reading your slide directly, reduction in cost directly impact your gross profit as a business. So if your team helps you save money, that leaves a little more profit lying around. And one of the things that a lot of people in the industry want more, as they should, is greater pay. So if there's a little bit extra profit, then maybe it can go back to the team.
Yes, and I think that is the realization that it takes that mentality as a group to do that. I've seen some breweries who even try to have like an open book discussion on a quarterly with their group and say like, look at what we did. We were able to this time last year. You were all here. We worked just as hard over the summer months, but we made less money. And now as a group, we made more profit. And everybody's working hard. That's not really the discussion. It's how can we do that smarter. So you're right, and it is that and then there's programs I think that some are trying to introduce tied to like that leaves more for is there kind of bonuses, there is someone coming and saying pay increases, etc. It can be a positive, but it all starts with understanding why these cost reductions are significant. And maybe a few examples from the brewing world would help here, Andrew. I laid out a few examples from actual breweries who have started doing this and put this into practice. So they get that, they see the graph and they say, okay, that's great. I get it. I've had my aha moment. What's next? What do we do? Where do we start doing get into some of this? And these are actual cost reductions from some of our breweries, and doing this in a way that there's kind of two schools of thought. Some people like to start eating that elephant, from the front and big chunks and dive right into the deep end, and others try to start small, and there's no wrong answer. So what I've got right here is a real brewery story of cost reduction. And we're kind of going to go down the list here. And what I've laid out are a few categories of what they did and then associated it back to the cost reduction. And these are all relatively recent in the last 90 days. So the first one is an example of a brewery that wants to start baby steps, right? Baby steps, and that's fine. That's that comfort level. So change sticker provider. Great example of low risk. It's not going to destroy your brewery, your environment, your anything to start to do that. And it's an easy to understand example. So they took the information. Maybe they went out and did 3 quotes. This one understood that what they were paying and collected the right information to understand this is what we get our stickers today. This is what the other alternative is. They did a small sample order. That's another thing that can help our samples. It can reduce the risk. That's another part of smart buying is, it can be risky to change partners. And if you change something big and it flops, you're kind of the face of that decision. And people are saying, oh, whatever happened with so-and-so? They used to, have this great product. And so we want to reduce that. And this example is they were able to save $450 by changing their sticker provider, just their sticker provider. And there's a lot to unpack here, where one of the things we talk about with breweries is I almost never want someone to roll their eyes when they see a dollar amount. 450, it's that death of 1,000 cuts thing. It's like the examples here we talk about is it adds up. You have all these costs that add up to the negative, right? Someone saying, oh, it's only this a month or that a month. Start to think about that, the reverse, that, $500 here, $20 there, $100 here, $1,000. All of that aggregate will help. And especially if you start to track it. But so that was the cost savings by sticker provider. They reached out, same example, used a promotion for fruit puree. Next line item, we're able to save $500 with that. They understood, this is what we get it for. This is what it's going to be. And then this is what we bought over the summer months. We know how much about on average, to do that. And so they were able to say, this is going to save us the 500 just over the summer for the lines that we're using for that. This was the one that I liked to see is they added the flexible growlers, and they didn't get away from their glass growler solution. They still had them as an option, right, with the great logo, and you see them all over the place. But I think this is an example of where people feel like they have to do an either or. I like to have gas growlers. They're not as popular. How do I augment that and save some money? So they went with flexible growlers. It's a smart buy. It's a fraction of the cost. Storage isn't an issue. It actually increased some of their sales to growlers because people are like, I'm going to get a growler to go, but I already have a couple of glass ones at home, or I'm taking this to the beach or on a hiking trail, right? There's all these reasons. So they saw an uptick in sales. Now that's not captured here. All we captured was the savings that they got from going with, augmenting their solution from how they did it last year. And that was $1,000 from their budget that they were able to reduce it on. 10% off boots, and then 10% off the Cicerone program are the next two lines here. $10 and $15, $25 combined. Goes back to my other statement is as long as the effort, if this didn't take you an entire 8-hour day to capture this, the value is there. So this was just enacting some programs and some promotions to do that. Now, you might have every new bartender or employee go through the Cicerone program, so that could add up over time. And then if you're getting them boots every time, so some of these are cumulative, and you want to be aware of that. But we just captured the ones they got this summer, which is $25 reduction. The last one is tap handles, where they were saved 7% across their tap handles that summer as they started to outfit their distribution, update some of their lines, update some of their different summer products, and that was a $1,700 savings, and was the most significant of everything. But the total savings for this exercise for this is $3,675. For those who can't see the slide, is a significant amount because of the cumulative nature. One of the things we're doing is we're showing how if you track this just even basically, you can start to see that makes an impact. And the goal of these also too these are all light lifts. These all involve something that should only take a little bit of interaction with the supply partner to capture here. So that we kind of rolled out. But what I struggle with, and I know a lot of other the breweries that we talk to struggle with, is how do you think of that, almost $4,000 in savings? And sometimes we show it to somebody, and I feel like they're trying to put it in a couple of different buckets. And one way, the simplest way, and I'll kind of roll it out, is maybe you fall into this bucket in two ways of thinking of this. The brewery made $3,675 in profit. That could be the way you think of it. I sometimes ask them how they think about it when someone says, "Hey, we just signed a new, for distribution, we just got this going," or these breweries just came on board, or the liquor store just signed up for this amount of shelf. Sometimes, however you think of sales is maybe how you want to think about it. Like, are you excited when you get told by one of your guys that we just had a big sale, or someone just booked out our tap room for the next 3 months? Maybe that's how you want to think about it. If you think profit, that's great. Then think of it that way, because everything on this list, they still operated their business exactly the same way, except they did it for less. So it's profit. That's one way, and that's great. The key, I think, is to make the association of why does this matter and why is my business healthier because of this? And I think it's important to make that connection of which bucket you do that in. But I have others that I find that with a little bit of a discussion, they have to think about it the other way, which is, this is the same as your brewery just getting an order for 110 barrels. So if we just use a generic, barrel profit of all I did there was, roughly $34, $33 of profit. Actually it's more like a 36, but the math here, I should have used round numbers, but I don't like round numbers sometimes. I like the exact ones. You'll have to trust the calculation here. But at the end of the day is, if you get really excited about someone just calling out of the blue and says, "I need 110 barrels of your Midwest IPA," that's a great phone call, right? Who doesn't want to get that? This is the same as your team coming to you and saying, hey, we did these 7 things over the summer. And you should be like, that is awesome. That's the same phone call, because that equals that $3,000 to $675 in profit is getting that. So whichever method you think about it is fine. It's just taking the win, because that either your team did or you did, and trying to figure out how we can do more of it, and giving it that credibility. So I find that this concept and the concept prior about the value of cost savings are 2 parts where I think people struggle with. I find when I'm talking to them, they're kind of like, hey, how am I supposed to get excited about $10 off of boots? And I get that, but I would say it's not just that. It's everything combined, and it's a program. And if you start to add it up, it could get very exciting. I wouldn't say overnight, but I would say in maybe 3 to 4 months. And then hopefully you want to start to say, how do we build off this program? How do we get people excited about it internally? So yeah, definitely a big concept here. I'd say, the segue a little bit of the how. This is some examples of the people, how they put it into practice. I'm a big discussion that we have with some of our breweries, and usually it's small to medium sized breweries. Larger breweries, or breweries who have been in business for 10 years, to some effect, I think, have figured this out. I think that's part of their longevity, is they've started to embrace or learn some of the business 101 elements, probably the least fun stuff. I'm not going to lie. I don't find anyone I talk to who gets really excited about, opening up an Excel. But I think they realize that I've got to at least have my accounting 101, my HR 101, and a little bit of smart buying 101, if I want to hit that 5 and 10 year mark. So we're usually talking to small to medium sized breweries who are figuring that out, and also want to be around that time frame. And this is the concept of how they get started is what comes up, and it kind of gets into the don't category, though. This is where we see a lot of breweries you talk to, and I actually put myself in this category. So I do and talk smart buying all day. And if you ask my wife, I even do it off hours, and bring her stories that I think are fascinating. And she says I'm using that word wrong. So that's kind of the starting point. Is I tell people, I'm like, I just did this the wrong way too. So it's everybody, and this isn't breweries. This is small business owners. So what we introduce is, how is stop B2C buying and start B2B buying. So what do we mean by B2C buying? B2C is business to consumer buying, right? So that is where it's how you buy for house. It's how you buy for when you are everyday purchases, what you do at home. And to give you an example, Amazon is perfect, Target is perfect, whatever, wherever you go and you say, do I want to spend all of Saturday running around and find out someone doesn't have something? Or, my kids have broken that, the 3rd time. Am I really going to go to the store and get it? Or am I going to get that done and go to Amazon or Target or go online? And I'm not. I'm for my home. I go online. I get what I need, and then I go do something else. And the reason that B2C is so popular is 2 things. One is it's time. You associate it with it. You have saved so much time rather than going to a store and find out they didn't have it. And that's the equation. People think it's dollars, but actually people are evaluating, either consciously or subconscious, that they have saved so much time. The next thing is they have a perception that I also feel like I've saved some dollars. Did I go out and get a quote for, for us in Wisconsin? It's weirdly 80 out, but yet in a month or a week rather, or in 48 hours, we might have snow. So I need to figure out how the windshield wipers and the scrapers keep disappearing every single season. So I need to go buy that. Am I going to go to the store and get that, or am I going to order that online? Probably not. Am I going to get 3 quotes for the $9.99 scraper? No. I'm going to go to a site that feels like it's pretty economical and get those ordered. And so that exercise was time and then price and a feeling of all that. That is B2C. That is how your mindset is. And here's the challenge and the crux of it for small business owners of this is technically to be efficient, to be in business 5 or 10 years, you should really be going into your brewery, putting on your purchasing hat and changing that mentality. And that's really hard to do. I mean, really hard. And I find myself sitting in this chair, needing something for Beverage Federation and wanting to get it done with. There's nothing I like more than crossing something off my to-do list. Just absolutely amazing, right? It's the little things. And so I want to get it done with. I know what I'm going to do. I get it done with. And after I've bought it, I'm like, I should have done that another way. I valued the time and crossing off the list. So I'm right there with you for that. But the exercise that I would say that if you walk into a brewery that has been around for 5 years or who is doing over 5,000 barrels, and that they in some form or fashion have developed this, maybe they don't call it this, maybe they don't talk about it as much, but they will talk about that there are some things that are part of B2B buying, which is business to business. You are not a consumer. You are not reaching out to a consumer when you're buying something for your organization. So what that is there's an awareness that if I don't do some of this, I will be losing money or spending too much, paying a little bit over market here and there and here and there. And that practice year over year will make us less profitable and eventually lead to bigger issues where we're saying we are not in the black, we are in the red. And that is a mindset that a business thinks about that homeowners don't think about when they're going to buy the scrapers for the car again. That's not what I'm thinking about is the concern of my family's finances when I'm trying to get that $10 purchase, that this could break the bank. And in a business to business mindset, you are starting the DNA of you know what, we got to take a pause and just do a little due diligence. And instead of buying this on Monday, we're going to buy it on Friday because that could save us a few $100s, and that's going to add up. So it's a recognition of that there's value as much as time saved. So that issue, I would say, Andrew, is and I know you talk to you talk to breweries all week long, and I feel like time and the fact that there isn't enough of it in a day is a big challenge. And when you're telling someone that the key to success when it comes to smart buying is finding more time in a day, just feels like an impossible ask. So I think that I try to equate it to, you can still, be efficient, but associate some value. It is probably taking some time away from something else, but it's giving it's giving a little bit of value to the exercise and recognizing that it's going to take some time. And that's a really big part of this, of the how. And I use an example here at a high level is getting 3 quotes on something is an example of an exercise of time. And or asking for a referral, saying, hey, I haven't gone with you. Could you send me some breweries in my area that you work with? Right? It's like you want to trust your gut, but or you just want to get it done. They have a website. They have a website. How sketchy could this be? probably not the best, approach of that. So the three quotes is saying, I want to buy it on Monday. I told myself I was going to buy it today. I'm going to reach out and get 2 more quotes, and I'm going to do this on Friday. And that is a business to business mindset that we try to talk about and say that is a key to success when you're talking smart buy, is that mindset. And it's hard. So we start off, recommend some baby steps. So talking back to your comment before about you're talking to employees and saying, hey, we have a new 3 quote rule on new vendors. If we're going to switch, I want you to bring me 3 quotes, and it's not hard, and I can walk you through how I do it, and we'll do one together. And we just can't be, just reaching out when so-and-so doesn't have something. We just, Google something, grab somebody and buy it to get it done with. That's an example of maybe starting small.
Now, Dan, let's talk specifically, and we talk about scrapers, just general things you're buying for your brewery, but let's talk equipment right now. So, like, what are some common mistakes breweries often make when purchasing equipment?
Yeah, it's great. I really see that there's 2 elements of that. It's teed up, as far as our discussion, I go back to 3 quotes. One of the ways that organizations introduce, when you're talking equipment or anything higher, but I'll stick with equipment as an example too, as you brought it up, is putting in and saying, if we're going to buy something over, let's say $3,000 or $5,000 piece of equipment, you've got to get 3 quotes. That's an example of where it's critical to your production environment, most likely, and that you need to do that. I see more and often, I hear from people, we got something, and we called, our one person I met at that conference, and they seem to send over a part of it. So the equipment part, I'd say the other factor of that when you talk equipment is an understanding that the market right now has a lot more secondhand used equipment than it did 5 years ago. It's just the state of the industry. And maybe your philosophy was before is I'd like to have stuff new. And I think now is the time to have a discussion of saying, if we're looking at that piece of equipment, we should probably look at 2 things. Yes, you can have 2 quotes for new, but also reach out and see if you can get and find out 1 or 2 used pieces of equipment. And maybe that's the best source for your discussion, because you might find the backstory of that equipment is it's only 2 years old. It's still under a warranty thing. Whatever, it's a better fit, but it's 50% less because of that, which could be a huge savings and allow you to recoup that cost in a fraction of the time. And so I think that is, I think that when you're talking equipment, that is 2 examples of something where you're introducing smart buy. I would also say this when it comes to equipment. I think that brewers, and they're not alone. I mean, I think that small businesses in general have this, but brewers say, they'll sell me that I like this brand. I like that manufacturer. I want to go with them. I said, that's fine. You can still go with them. That doesn't mean you shouldn't get a few other quotes, because that information is still important to your organization. That could still change the discussion. You could use that information to have a conversation with that brand you want to go with and say, I want to go with you, but someone else is 25% less, and see what you can do. Maybe it's extended warranty. Maybe it's better service. Maybe whatever. You can start that discussion. It doesn't preclude you from going with that person, but it does make it a better purchase of that and doing that exercise. So that is another thing that I hear is at the end of the day, I want to buy from so-and-so. It's that you can still do that. This is about educating from a procurement standpoint, yourself first, and then using that to get the best value when you do pull the trigger.
So we just talked a little bit about equipment. Now let's talk a little bit more about the raw materials, the ones we love so much, hops, malt, yeast. So Dan, what are like the key factors that breweries should consider when purchasing these raw materials? Anything else you'd like to add to that one?
Yeah, ingredients are, really interesting. When we started, we jumped into ingredients, and it was like walking into a conversation around what's your favorite beer you make. Like, it was very loaded when you talk ingredients. So procurement, usually when you're talking like a commodity element of it, it's like, I didn't invite the guys that make our stickers to my wedding, right? I mean, you're not that connected. But when you start to talk about ingredients, there's a connection to that, right? That's what you're making your craft with. So quality comes up, relationship comes up. And so ingredients was, I kind of set that aside. I set ingredients and cans aside as you're going to want to tackle those because there's a lot of backstory. There's a lot of moving pieces than stickers and other things and tap handles and stuff like that. But when you talk ingredients, there's an interesting trend going on right now that is coming up to be aware of and to make sure it's the right fit to you. And that's long-term contracts. You will not find a tap handle provider or a hose provider or even a chemical provider talking a lot of time about a 2 or 3 year contract. But you get into hops and malts and malt and et cetera, and cans and of that, where there has been post-COVID, there was some before, but post-COVID, a lot of discussion around, I imagine you've probably had this conversation from your ingredient provider saying you really should sign up for a 2 or 3 year contract because that way I can guarantee supply delivery and you're top of the list. And there's this great value prop. And if you went through, COVID and someone calling you saying, I can't get something and supply chain, like if that's what keeps you up at night, that value prop sounds really good. And it can be. And so what we just say is make sure you're aware, though, there's always a pros and cons list when you're talking procurement and contracting. So the pro is what they're talking about with that supply chain issues. They can flat out, they should be including some kind of volume, some kind of deeper discount because what you're doing is committing to a 2 year contract. So if they're saying, great, why don't I just lock you in for 2 years and at what I would have done for a year, that's like going on the car lot and seeing sticker price. So you should have that discussion, should be the value. The other thing that then locks you into is, let's say the market changes significantly to the good, be aware of that next year. Like crop yields, sway one way or the other, and suddenly, prices have dropped on a malt solution from your current provider. You change that risk, and that's a tough decision sometimes. Sitting here in 2024 to be saying, do we want to do this? I think that what I would tell the breweries is if it helped you solve pain you've had in the past, then you should explore that. And if it helps you sleep at night better, you should then make sure it financially makes sense to you. So identify what that price point would have to be so you aren't kicking yourself next year if things change. And you say, well, it made the most sense, and it still makes the most sense to us because we know our margins. And kind of have a walk away point. So saying like, it would have to be this for us to sign a 3 year contract. And a 3 year contract is long. I'd say most conversations right now are around 2. So when you talk ingredients, I think that's the biggest trend to be aware of and doing your research and talking to others about. But here's the problem. Sometimes it's hard to talk to the brewery down the street. You can definitely do that, but there's so many variables that might, your production, what you produce, how you produce it might be so different. They might say, oh, it was a no-brainer. I would tell them, can you explain to me why you think that is? Because it might not feel like a no-brainer to you. And that because it's just, sometimes it's a combination of what the data shows, but also what your gut, but you got to use both. Big trend in the industry regarding ingredients. It's a good topic. That's one we're talking a lot about, because especially this time of year. So Andy, just the do's and don'ts. If I could, really, when I was running the IT company that I talked about years ago, this is the slide I wish a younger, less cocky Dan had embraced a little more. And it was more confidence of that. Sales will help. We just need to sell more and market more, right? This is the do's and don'ts of smart buying. and don't feel that if you're doing this, a lot of these are what people are doing. So don't buy the exact same way you did last year. Businesses evolve. You should be looking for ways to how can we best practices, do what others are doing that are around for 5 to 10 years. You want to borrow from that, and that identifies some change. How can we get a little better with our taproom environment, our experience, our training, our I'm sure hopefully you have a list somewhere, and this is where I'd put on there is how can we do a little bit better with smart buying this year than we did last year. Buying from the same partners from last year. I cannot count how many times I'll talk to someone about something, and I think sometimes their mind goes to their like great partner relationship. They're rock stars. That's not what we're usually talking about. I'm talking about the one that you just roll your eyes when you look at the phones ringing and you know they're going to miss a delivery. And you're like, well, what am I going to do? That's our guy. We've bought from him for the last 2 years, that thing. You're going to look to see what other options are out there. So I start typically identify the ones that you feel are hurting your business. They 9 times out of 10, unless you're a brewery in rural Montana and there is one CO2 provider, and I've talked to you, that's probably what it is. But 9 times out of 10, there's an alternative solution. You could invest and start to kick the tires on CO2 production, right? So there's usually a lot of different solutions. It's just a matter of identifying what are the ones. Only getting one quote. We talked about this. I repeat this from time to time. It is you think you have the best price or the best solution or the best value, and there's a lot of options out there. And I would also say that what you should be doing when you get more than one quote then is evaluate on more than just price. And the last thing I would say is, take a beat and stop focusing on getting it done. It will get done, but associating that it's getting it done right versus just getting it done. And that is something I have to remind myself weekly when I look at my to-do list is if you're rushing through it just to mark it off, it's probably, put it to tomorrow, carve out 30 minutes, not 3, and do that. And I usually only have that thought after I've done it, but I'm work in progress as well. So those would be our 5 big stacking up of don't. They will have the biggest impact, which kind of leads over to our do's. And this is starting with time, kind of ended with time on the don't list. I have recommended that whatever you feel is your day where it's the quietest, where you can find a corner, maybe between 2 tanks and a laptop, wherever you can find that quiet spot. I know that in itself is a challenge. Is start with an hour a week and review areas you can save money. Call it smart buying. And then what you've done with that hour, let's say it's Monday and it's 1 to 2, that's your hour. That's just smart buying. Set aside. You've suddenly created the hour. It's a great start. But don't then just start buying your stuff during. That is not the hour that you're, we need some of this, we need some of that, we need some of that. And I'm just going to order it. It's not your hour to do the buying. It's to create the list of what's that vendor we're going to evaluate. I'm going to reach out and get 2 more quotes on a used piece of equipment, even though I've got one on a new. It's the activities we've talked about that will start to create your playbook. And just put them in a document, throw them in there. Doesn't matter. A year or 2 from now, that playbook will have a bunch of notes and it will look good. But don't feel you have to write this shiny playbook. It's just examples where you're just saying you have a thought like, hey, we haven't looked at an alternative for that in a while. Or I wonder what we're paying to that. Or I'm going to get a quote on a 1 year for malt as well as a 2-year contract. I'm going to take a look at. Those are where you do those activities during that hour and then just toss them into an open, Word document, a Google document, and that'll start to be your smart building playbook. Tracking cost reduction. This is the other thing. It can look ugly to start with. That's okay. But to start to have a document, and this is what I would work with or bring to your accountant to, have that discussion in the month or quarter. But it's where you start to see the wins added up. And that's so important to do that. But to say, hey, we switched providers and we saved $50. We we applied a discount. We followed a different solution, like the flexible growler example. You track that. It's critical to doing that success. And then what a lot of people think is that their accountant is doing this, that their accountant is going through all of their stuff and finding all these savings, and will just be able to produce a report. That is not what accountants do 95% of the time. Their job is about making sure the right money is flowing in and out and all of their reports and documents. It is not to do to find and capture savings from your supply chain. They can help you, but that's typically 95% of the time not part of their scope of work. I mentioned this. We covered this on equipment, the getting 3 quotes and setting a dollar amount can be a great way to teach people. And I'll end on this. The biggest teach and learn right along with another team member, employee, how to do smart buying. I think just for me coming to the brewing industry, I find myself early on, I got a little used with saying, like, I don't know how you do that. How do you do that? Just falling on your sword almost and being a little humble and say, like, can I ask you a question? I didn't know a lot about the brewing process. I've learned a lot, but it started off by saying, I don't know a lot. And then saying, let's learn this together. And that can be a great way. Then you have an employee who is learning it, can start to do it, but then you can admit that, listen, this is new to me. Let's see how this first, 3 quotes goes, and all of that. So that's really our biggest takeaway from a do's to don't.
Now, Dan, we have a question in the comments that I want to pose to you. And they ask, how can breweries incorporate sustainability into their purchasing decisions without significantly increasing costs? What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, this comes up. I think that there is a perception, and it's accurate, that if I want to be sustainable, it's going to cost more. So I want to be green. It's part of our DNA. It's part of our thing. We want to be sustainability, but we want to do that. That goes back to that exercise of starting. And I'll give 2 examples that we've seen. Someone found a recycled cup solution for their tap room versus their standard plastic ones, and was surprised to find out when they looked at it, the cups that were recycled were actually the same cost as the plastic ones they were getting that were not recycled. So even though the perception was, to be sustainable, I'm going to have to pay like 10, 15% more, do the homework and find out that there might be categories that you don't, with some of your sanitary, chemicals for cleaning your restrooms and the bar and taproom area are areas you can be sustainable. And that's an analysis where you're getting some quotes and saying, hey, and put your supply partners on some of that. Hey, can you get me some quotes on some sustainable products compared to what we've gotten in the past, and see how that stacks up? And then you might just start picking the ones to start off with that aren't an increase to cost. So that's one way. Is I think that those products and a lot of things that's sustainable have continued to come down and make it less of an investment. And the second thing is, for certain things, there are rebates and grants from state agencies that actually help you offset that. So something we're doing with some of the different breweries is, as the vertical gets more into things like automation. So each state has an energy organization that works with the municipalities. There's one in Wisconsin called Focus on Energy. So what they allow to do is, if you're going to put in automation and reduce your energy footprint in your production environment, they will provide a rebate, a sizable rebate, if it actually does reduce energy. So the problem with that is it takes some email and some meetings and some things like that. But to give you an example of the cost should be there too, of saying, we're going to do this sustainable thing that is going to cost us, $8,000. It's going to save us, $5,000 a year, and the state's going to give us $3,000 through a rebate program. So that you're being sustainable, it makes business sense, and you're getting outside help to augment that and kind of reward you for doing something that's sustainable. So those are two ways to overcome it. Where how do I run leaner and yet support sustainability and initiatives that are important to us?
So
That's a
as
great
we
question.
wind down, Dan, you've thrown out so much great information today. I hope people really take note of this because it's not just about making more money. It's about saving money too, working a little less hard, a little more smarter, being more efficient. You've thrown out lots of great words today. So for anyone interested in learning more about what you can do and helping save them money and be more cost efficient, I mean, we've got it up there on the slide, but how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, give me an email, Dan at Beverage Federation. Our website is Beverage Federation. Even if you're not a member and you have questions, I'd love just sending over resources. If you say, "Hey, we're trying to do this, we're looking into where can we find some used equipment," or "Hey, how would you get started?" We've got a lot of content, low cost, no cost stuff that here's some resources. So reach out with questions. This is what we like to do. Love to hear success stories too. Follow up. There's nothing better to hear from a brewery a couple months later saying, "Hey, we were able to save a significant amount over the last couple of months doing some of these things." So we're here. We want to help. We want to help educate. It's something that I have learned firsthand from running an organization and seeing the impact of not doing this well year over year. So I do very much start with saying, that is where my passion comes from. Is I wish I had more resources like we give out today, because I felt like I didn't know where to get started, and that's a big part of it.
Awesome, Dan. I do want to point out for everyone driving right now, Dan has a QR code for everybody watching, perhaps on YouTube. There's a dinosaur in the center of it, so it's a nice little touch there, Dan.
Hey, did I mention at the top that I got a little bit of nerd in me? So yeah, don't shy away from it.
I love it. So one final question for you. You've gone over a lot. If everybody listened to you, taken a lot of information, they're probably going to digest it. But what's one thing that they should do right now after listening to this conversation?
Yeah, I really would say that the first thing I would write down is what would be a cost savings goal for the organization for the year, and write down a number that you think is both tough but achievable. I have found that gets the wheels turning of, okay, I've thrown down the gauntlet. I've written down a number, and I'm going to give you some examples. Every organization is in, but like 7 or 8%, not too low, not too high. Write that down, and then that should start the conversation in your head about, okay, if that's my number, if I want to do that in 2025, how? And I think all good things flow from that question to yourself. But I would start with that on a Post-it note, and then be thinking about it in Q4 about maybe how you get into that in January or earlier.
That's a great one, Dan. Well, Dan, always appreciate you and our conversations. Everybody, I encourage you to reach out to Dan at beveragefederation.com or learn more at beveragefederation.com as well. And everybody, we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Thanks, Andrew. Always good to talk to you here. Thanks, everybody.